and with the main thought in mind, purpose. How can we utilize the property to its fullest extent and be as efficient and self-sufficient as we possibly can, which was the main reason for the move, to get the family out into a more rural structure, not have to worry about, city ordinances, what we can and can't do.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have our special guest, the man next door, who moved out of the city and into a homestead outside the urban area to establish acreage and also get some agricultural sustenance going, some self-sufficiency going for his family. He's here back to give us an update on some of the new types of food that he's raising for his family and some of the new adventures and learning that he's doing to find out about the resources that he's got on his new property and how he can use those to broaden the options he has for sustenance off the land. Welcome back, the man next door.
Thank you, Dunnigan. Appreciate coming back.
So in our previous 3 episodes, you guided our listeners through your journey from city living, where you started doing some urban bee farming, some honey raising, and also you were raising eggs and egg-laying chickens, as well as meat chickens. And now in your new property where you've got some acreage, you've got some new scope to scale up some of your existing operations and also opening up some new adventures. So could you update us on some of the latest things you've done this season, how you're broadening out some of what you were already doing and some of the new adventures you're working on?
For sure. Well, being the first season at the new homestead, getting through such a crazy winter that we had here in this area of the country, and I suspect many folks all around the country were ready for the new season. However, we talked last about doing some of I just started some egg laying hens from a peep standpoint, which is basically 1 or 2 day old freshly hatched chickens. They take about 4 months before they start to lay, so we're still working through that. Be sometime in the latter part of August when they start to lay.
How many did you have in your old city chicken egg layers, and how many do you have now?
Well, I had as many as 35 when I was in the city, and part of the reason for that was we had a number of folks, neighbors, friends that wanted to pick up some of these farm fresh eggs, so to speak. And so we scaled that back slightly. Currently we have 16, mainly to take care of the family at this point. But we certainly have more room to expand upon that as the need arises. I don't know if we mentioned this in the last interview, but we were toying with the fact of starting a rabbitry for the same purpose on the meat rabbit side, the meat side. And did a lot of research on how efficient from a cost standpoint or economic standpoint rabbit meat is. And most of the conventional wisdom suggests that 1 pound of beef equals 6 pounds of rabbit from an economical standpoint. And the main reason for that is one of the neat things about rabbits is the mother takes care of the young for 3/4 of the time from birth till processing date. And you only have to feed the mother.
Let me understand. If you're going to raise meat for your family, the amount of resources of your own time and money that you're going to put into raising a pound of beef, for that same amount of resources, you could raise yourself 6 pounds of rabbit meat for your family.
Correct.
Okay.
And not to mention, you can do it in a very small space as comparative. You need a little bit more space for a head of cattle. And rabbits, actually, you can do it in a garage, in a shed, outside the house, things of that nature. So it allows you a lot more options, especially if your homestead is on the smaller side and you don't have acreage. So since our last interview, I was able to find a local man that had a rabbitry that I was able to pick up 3 does and a buck, which is what they call them in the rabbit world. And he brought them to me pregnant, so he put them together with one of his other bucks that he had. And we just had young about 9-10 days ago. And the 3 does had 25 kits, is what they call them from my understanding. And out of that, 17 have survived. Nature does its thing. And they're coming along great. And once they hit about 4 months, then we'll process our first freezer rabbit, which we're very excited for. Part of that was a little learning curve. One of the processes that you have to do to provide a little area for each of the does is you have to put a nesting box in each cage. And I was probably 2 days late from putting them in when I should have. You have to put them about a week. That was, since I didn't impregnate the rabbits, or I wasn't part of that process, there was a little guesswork to the timing. So I built the nest boxes from some plans I found on the internet. And when I put them in, one of the things that the does will do is they'll pull fur from their underside, and they put that fur in there, and it becomes a bedding that helps both a soft landing for the newbies and also a warm environment for them. Because one of the things that's very important early on is that they keep warm. And then mother goes in there once a day to nurse them. And it's actually pretty neat. She goes in there, stands above the new rabbit babies, and they turn upside down and they nurse laying down. It's very cool. Now, like I said, it's been 9 or 10 days. After about 3, they start to put on fur. That's very noticeable. Now they're full of fur, and they just started to open their eyes. So everything I've read said it takes them up to 2 weeks. 9-10 days in, we have a few of them that are just right about there. We're starting to see the eyes underneath those slits, So, after, like I said, about 2 months of that, she'll nurse. I'll pull them out, I'll wean them off mom, start to feed them the rabbit food at that point, and once they hit 4 months, we'll put them in the freezer. And then we'll start that process all over again.
Have you ever butchered rabbits before?
I have. Mostly, though, on the wild rabbit side, where we would actually go hunting with the kids. Growing up, and very easy to process, so I'm very confident in that end, going through it before in the past. So.
And what's your favorite way of preparing them for serving to the family?
Well, this is still on the new side. Prior to actually going and starting a rabbitry, I wanted to make sure the kids were going to be game, so when we're producing all this meat rabbits that they actually wanted to eat it. So I actually picked up a couple processed already, brought them home, did some research on how to grill them, which is just a process that I prefer as it comes to prepared meat. And going through that, we grilled them successfully. The kids, 9 out of 10 of them loved it. The 10th one, I think, was a little bit getting over the fact that it was a rabbit versus a chicken, something they were more used to. But this is the first time, in my experience, that to taste farm-raised rabbit over wild rabbit, and it's significantly different.
Now, you obtained these sample rabbits for your market test survey that you did with your target audience there, right. From the same person who provided you with the does and the buck that you bought?
That is correct.
So your kids have had a chance to taste the same type of rabbit that they should be expecting here. So you made sure that the family would have a taste for this before you started in the operation, make sure that it was going to be successful for you.
Absolutely.
And now, back in your old location, you were raising meat hens as well, and now you've scaled up that operation.
Well, we tested it kind of in the same way we did with the rabbits. I picked my first attempt at doing meat birds. We picked up 5 when we ordered a half a dozen layers. And it made sense. They're very inexpensive to order, mail order, and from a shipping cost, it didn't add any. So I tried 5. My intention was to find somebody locally that could process them for me, and unfortunately couldn't find anybody local. And my understanding, that's a challenge all around the country with folks that I've spoke to. So a friend said that he had grown up doing it, and he would be happy to show us, which he did, which certainly built up my confidence that I could do it myself and do it well. So that went very well. However, when it comes to raising meat birds, it's a little bit more difficult in a confined area because meat birds in and of themselves are just machines at both eating and pooping. So they create a lot of waste, and they do it very fast. So from the moment you get the birds until the day of processing, 8-9 weeks goes by. So it happens fast, and they're in the freezer. But having a little extra space is going to help in this regard. So knowing that, we just I guess it's been about 8-9 days as well, we ordered 70 meat birds.
Oh, man.
And this time I'm going to do it with a friend, and we're going to share in that process. And right now they're in the brooder, and for those that have ever done birds, it's just like a box, a container, just a small confined space. And this, since there's 70 of them, the small confined space is like 12 feet by 8 feet. But it's just some cardboard we had left over from a purchase. And you have to keep them warm for the first few weeks. In this weather, it's a little easier being that it's warmer now, but we do provide that heat. And once they hit approximately 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to move them outside. And we're going to have the opportunity to use a process called a chicken tractor, which is just basically a movable pen. And it'll allow us to fertilize the lawn in the process. And then we'll move them a couple times a day. So it basically allows you to disperse the waste that they leave behind, which can be significant. And it also allows them to pick up some foraging, which is always better for the meat on a number of different ways. Now,
are you purchasing this chicken tractor? Are you building it from plans or from a kit, or how are you doing that?
We're actually going to build it from scratch. There's if you go on the internet and type in chicken tractor, you're going to see a myriad of options. Folks, ingenuitive folks that have gotten together to do different things. And after reading about it and thinking about how the children are going to actually help move this pen, I'm going to use the PVC process. I'm going to use PVC and some chicken wire to make the pen. So it'll be pretty light, easy to move for the little guys. At the same time, be an effective pen for the chickens to get out. Keep them off predators.
Well, we'll have to have you back in less than 8 to 9 weeks to find out how this crop of 70 meat birds, which is like triple the size or more from your previous flock.
Yeah, the most we've ever done is 20, and that was quite a bit to do in the city. One of the other things that motivated me to do more, not only having a little bit more space, but we happened to, just by talking around to some of the local folks, one thing leads to another, and I found out that one of the local guys has a chicken drum style plucker, and I had an opportunity to go see him process a number of birds. And it's very impressive, and I've seen it. It's the first time I've ever seen it in person. You can see many videos on it. But the process I used prior to this was skinning the birds, because to pluck them does take some time if you do it by hand. Where these drum-style pluckers literally would pluck a chicken in 20 to 30 seconds, and it's very efficient. It plucks them very well. It's a great process. And it'll allow me to keep the skin on the birds, which is always a little better depending upon the way that you cook them.
Right.
So I'm excited about that. So that'll be our first attempt to use a chicken drum style plucker and process all these birds when we do.
Is that another one from Herrick Kimball's Whiz Bang design?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And are you you said you're going to borrow the one the first year, and if you like it, you maybe set up yourself up for your own for next year.
Without a doubt. Herrick does sell some plans on his website, very inexpensive. And he also sells some of the more machine-type parts, which I'll definitely get from Herrick as well.
Just as we mentioned on a previous episode, if anyone wants to find out more about that, it's Herrick Kimball at the deliberateagrarian.blogspot.com. Now, in addition to meat birds, which you've done before, rabbits, which you've just started on for the first time, you've also added a couple other species to your flock. What can you tell us about those?
Well, in my travels of learning about, chickens and meat birds and egg layers and processing and all that, I came across a man named Joel Salatin, and he owns and operates a farm down in Virginia called Polyface. And he's a very vocal man in terms of, getting the word out there and how to do this, how to do it well. And he's kind of like on a single man crusade about the local movement, buying local, getting to know your farmer.
Right.
Very interesting guy, very stand-up, involved early on in the organic movement. Anyway, that being said, I always wanted to after trying my own chicken for the first time, I thought, well, why can't we do some of our own turkey? And, most conventional wisdom will tell you that you can't raise them together. So that discouraged me early on, because I'm thinking, well, especially in the city, I don't have the room to produce another pen to keep them separate. And so I stood down from that. But then after doing some reading with Joel Salatin, he's found a way to actually put them together and put them together successfully. So when we picked up our our egg layers, we added 2 bronze-breasted turkeys to that group, and we did this back towards the end of April, and now the turkeys are past what most would call their mortality rate, when there's real risk in losing them due to disease-prone, because they're very, very disease-prone as compared to chickens who are quite robust. And his recipe is raising them together is no more than 1 turkey per 5 birds, 5 chickens in particular, and these would-be egg layers. And they teach them how to drink. They teach them how to eat.
The chickens teach the turkeys.
Exactly. So they mimic them. They see where they're drinking, and they go mimic their process. And if you read about them, they're just not as I don't know if intelligent is the right word, but they're just not as efficient as to I guess protect themselves from issue. But the chickens help in that regard, and I'm very excited. So for the first time, we're gonna enjoy a Thanksgiving with our own meat turkey.
I've heard of people raising sheep and using llamas to guard the sheep, but I've never heard of people using chickens to teach the turkeys how to do their basic life functions. But that's pretty humorous.
Sure, for sure. Well, the other thing that I got myself into is the Muscovy duck. Another area of research came across this unique-looking duck, and if anybody's never seen anywhere, either in person or in photo, Muscovy adult duck, it's quite unique. It has these caruncles, they call them. They come off the face and the bill. Almost looks like tumors, kind of red tumors growing off of their face. So a lot of folks think that they're ugly, and I would suspect, it's just something that they're not used to seeing. But it's the only duck that derives its lineage from, or should I say, separate from the mallard family. They grow in South America and Mexico. They're actually tree ducks by nature. They do go in water, and Muscovy means mosquito eater. So they love mosquito larvae. So a lot of folks have them in their ponds that help control the mosquito populations. Very efficient ducks. But the main reason I got them is they're also very efficient at producing more ducks. The average 5 female ducks with a male will produce somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 new ducklings a year. And the other unique thing about the Muscovy duck is it's a red meat. And you can eat it like you do duck, more on the rare side if that's the way you like your duck. And it's also not fatty and greasy like some of the mallard family ducks are traditionally known for. So we're going to do what we did with some of the other animals on the farmstead or the homestead. We're going to let them all grow to adulthood, and then we're going to process one of the females. Have the family try it, and if everybody likes it, then we're gonna use that as another option for freezer meat, which would be these Muscovies. And as they produce young, we'll keep the 4 females and males breeder stock. And as they produce young, and when I mean efficient, there's really not much you have to do. They'll rear their own young. They do it very well.
How do you keep them from, if they're tree dwelling, how do you keep them from flying away?
Well, you can. How I'm going to do is I'm going to clip one of their wings,
okay.
Which is what we do with the egg layers as well. And by clipping one of their wings, it takes them off balance just enough where they don't take flight. However, I have read a number of farmers around the country that do not clip their wings, and they say traditionally, as long as you provide some shelter and food, they would be inclined to stay. Although one might take flight and lose one from time to time, they said for the most part they stay in the area. So that's an option, although I don't think I'm going to take that risk at this point. I'll clip the wing, which is fairly easy to do. And if you're not sure how to do it, if you decide to do it, there's so many videos you can see and how it's done. It's very simple. It doesn't hurt the bird in any way, because it's like clipping your fingernails. It's just the flight feathers are just being trimmed, which is what gives them the lift they need to get up. So that's the process we're going to take. So we're looking forward to trying our first Muscovy.
Well, in addition to your rabbit meat and your duck meat and your chicken meat and your egg-laying chickens and turkeys, you've also been scouting around your property, your new property that you've acquired outside of the city area, which has some additional agriculture benefits, and you've been trying to see what else might be. Gardening is one of the things you're doing out there. Can you describe a little bit of the expansion you've been able to do with your gardening?
Well, the homestead that we had in the city was very much clay-based, which made it a little bit more difficult. We did garden, and we tended to focus on the type of plants that do well in that kind of soil. And we did amend the soil, adding organic matter to help break up some of that added lime. And those are the different things that will help in breaking up your clay so your plants can get through it. we kind of lucked out when we moved out to the homestead, where the folks that lived there prior had a pretty robust garden, and some of the soil type that we moved into is a sandy loam, and it's very easy to till. However, also dries out very quickly. So those are a couple of the challenges that you have with that. And so this is kind of a learning curve on a number of levels. Our basic home garden that we have is a 50 by 40 feet plot that had been gardened for a number of years. A lot of organic matter had been put in that spot for a long time. So it's very successfully growing the basics, your tomatoes, your peppers, and so forth. But at the same time, we're learning how to work with the new type of soil in regards to moisture level. And we found that with this style, we're starting the transplants first, and then moving those transplants out into the soil. So it gives them enough start where they can actually,
where they've got some root structure develops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're very quickly then driving down into that very loose soil, which I'm sure their root structure is pretty robust.
Being outside the city, you also mentioned in your previous recording that you have access to well water, so you should have an ample water supply.
Absolutely.
I know you're probably investigating so many different things, but wonder if you've checked into whether you're going to do drip irrigation or what kind of irrigation method you think you're going to use for flooding or whatever you're going to do.
Well, right now I use kid irrigation, which means that every day... Every day the kids go out there, fill the buckets from the well, and water the garden.
Now you're exploring beyond the garden, though. You're looking around at other natural resources you've got on this acreage. What else are you finding?
Well, it's been a bit of a exploration process for sure. And what I mean by that is, I'm trying to identify every tree, most of the plants. I had a friend come over and tell me about every single plant. And what they are, and some are edible, some are not, things of that nature. And, we have several different wild berries that grow on the property, which is really neat. We have a number of mulberry trees, which is kind of cool, so we're learning about, what we can do with those. We have walnut trees. So basically, we're just going through the property in this first season and not only figuring out what we have, but what we'd like to see on the property ultimately, and with the main thought in mind, purpose. How can we utilize the property to its fullest extent and be as efficient and self-sufficient as we possibly can, which was the main reason for the move, to get the family out into a more rural structure, not have to worry about city ordinances, what we can and can't do.
Right.
And so far that's where we're at, and I one of the things that I'm going to focus on is some fruit trees ultimately. I was going to actually, I have in mind already the fruit trees I want to go with in our climate that work really well. However, I think it was prudent through the wife's prodding to let us feel out this first season. Then we'll have a really good idea where to place them. It's also allowing me to see how drainage works throughout the season as the rains come and go. For that, and again, being that it's a sandy loam soil, that does drain pretty well.
Now, you mentioned that some of the trees that you've got on your property may be considered ornamental fruit trees, so nobody would consider them edible because they're ornamental, but you've done a little bit more research into that.
I did. We actually have a couple what they call Bradford pear trees, and after doing some research, they're basically, my understanding is a Chinese variety that was introduced sometime in the middle of the 1900s, 1950s, 60s, and as the housing boom went, they were seen as a great tree for a landscaping tree, so to speak, an ornamental tree like a lot of them are. So it's a pear tree, and they're really tiny. They're about cherry-sized pears, and they have the same issues like apple seeds do. There's a trace of cyanide in there, so so they see them as an unedible, mainly because of their size and the fact it would be difficult to seed them. Just a pretty tree. Although if you read about them, they're also not ultimately. They stopped using them for many of the landscaping ideas because they're kind of weak structured. So a heavy wind comes in as they get too tall, they would break. Also very tight clustered, so birds love them, and obviously because of the pears and whatnot. So I don't like taking no for an answer. If that tree is producing some kind of edible fruit,
right.
what can we do with it? And so, of course, going onto the World Wide Web, found out that you can make some amazing jam out of these small berries, and it's a very simple process of boiling these berries down and canning them. That's one thing you can do.
You got to get the cyanide-bearing seeds out of there.
Yeah, the beauty of that is, number one, it would take a very large amount, more than a cup of these small, tiny little seeds. But when you boil them down, the seeds don't release this unless they're ingested, and they go through your system and broken open, like you're saying. So you would boil these small berries down, and they produce just a lot of them, small little tiny pears. Boil them down, and it's described as a sweet tart jelly, kind of like putting some sweet tarts, smashing them up, and making a jelly out of them. So I'm sure the kids will like them. And then for Dad and Dad's buddies, my understanding is it makes a phenomenal pear wine. So that might be a nice little addition to the holidays.
Well, we would love to have you back at the end of the season when you've had a chance to explore some of these additional options that your new environs are providing to you. And before we let you go, I wanted you to tell one more story about a type of meat harvesting that most folks may not have experienced. It's actually a throwback to your childhood, and it's really almost a lost art, but it's something that you're passing down to your kids. And it opens up one more option for people who are thinking about a situation where they really would need to feed their families off the land and be able to harvest their own nutritious food for their family. It completely is outside the scope of what most people think about. So why don't you tell us that one?
Well, obviously you're talking about our frog harvest. As being a pastime when I was a child, young man, 12, 13, 14, and all the way up into my 20s, had a great uncle of mine that introduced me to frogging. In our states here in the Midwest, you can, as part of your fishing license, frogging and turtle harvesting are part of that license opportunity. So I introduced my boys to this process of going frog gigging a number of years ago. But since we moved out to the new homestead, this was our first opportunity to get out there, and realizing that, number one, you say lost art. I think it's a dying art all the way around. In our state, they're even asking questions, have you done this in the last 5 years? So that kind of gives us a clue into the populations are booming, and that's the beauty of harvesting, because you do help in that regard.
You're saying the frog populations.
Exactly, they're booming. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great thing to do with the children. Get you out there. You go out in the latter part of the day, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and you don on a set of chest waders or hip boots, and you go out into the pond, and you bring your flashlight, and you spotlight some frogs, and you use your little gig. You gig them, and it's...
Can you describe for people who aren't familiar with it what a gig is?
Sure. A gig looks like a very tiny pitchfork, for lack of a better way to describe it. And we found that the best way to put these together is to use a telescopic paint pole. And you can buy these gig tips at just about any sporting goods store. And they're very inexpensive. The last one we purchased was under $3. And the telescopic paint pole is $5 to $8. And you just screw it on. It even comes with the screw to screw it on the tip. And you basically... open up that pole to its full size, and you get close enough in a somewhat of a creeping predatory way to get as close as you can to the frog, and while you have your light on them, you harvest them. And then traditionally we would carry a backpack, and while we danced around the different creeks and ponds that we would go to, and throw them in the backpack, and at the end we would process and finish cleaning the frogs. And traditionally you would only keep the rear legs, and then we would provide some nature food for fish and some of the small game that walk around or are around ponds, like coons and such, possum and so forth, and they would finish up the rest of them for us. Occasionally we'd get a big enough frog where we could harvest the front legs as well, because some of the American bullfrogs in the Midwest are very large.
Yeah, I meant to ask you what varieties of frogs are you actually hunting?
Yeah, we're going after the American bullfrog traditionally. In this area, you can also harvest the green frog. However, the American bullfrog, from the standpoint of return on your investment, is the best way to go because they do get large, and it's some fantastic eating, to say the least.
So you arrive back at home with this backpack full of bullfrogs, and what do you do with them then?
Well, to harvest the rear legs, you take a very sharp knife, and most of us, including myself, use fillet knife. Sharpened fillet knife is real simple, and a little bit hard to describe over the air, but basically you fold back each hind leg against the knife, and you're going through the joint, the hip joint,
sure,
which means that you're missing all the bone. And then once the legs are harvested, you have to skin them. And they have a skin that's on them that's a lot like a frogman. It's like almost looks like a neoprene, skin-like substance that's on the muscle. And you basically hold the muscle in the rear of the leg, and then you just simply peel back that skin, and they're ready to go. And what we would do then, after we harvest them and then skin them, we would make a saltwater solution. And it's that part's always pretty neat with the kids, because as soon as you add the salt, it gets them nerves going, and they start kicking.
Oh my gosh!
So all the muscle comes alive.
The leg all by itself.
All by itself. It's looks like it wants to come right out of that water. So it's kind of neat. The kids get a kick out of it. However, it has a cleaning process to it by putting the salt water in, and it's not a bloody process by any stretch, but there is still some in the meat, and it draws all of that out into the water, and it has a tenderizing effect on the meat. So then the next day we would then drain and clean the water. So basically dump the water, rinse them out, and if we were going to eat them, we would eat them then, or if we were going to freeze them, we would package them up and put them in the freezer for another day.
And the preparation method?
Preparation method is like this. We've cooked them a number of different ways, but the way that was most successful was basically a bowl of flour with some salt and pepper, another bowl with a beaten egg or two, and then you dip them in the egg, roll them in the flour, and then do a shallow pan fry, about a minute or so on each side, into the napkin and down the hatch.
Well, Guy Next Door, thank you so much for circling back with us on your expanded operations in your new environment, and we'd love to have you back at the end of the season to get some stories and lessons learned on the many different types of food and meat that you're providing to your family. And it broadens all of our horizons, brings up options. We all need to start thinking outside of the grocery store in terms of outside the system and how we can provide food for our own family. When you really come down to it, one of our primary responsibilities after basic shelter and safety is sustenance for our family, and this just opens more and more options. So I am confident that a lot of the options that you've described will trigger thought processes and people to realize, even if they've never tried this before, there's so many resources out there on the internet. You mentioned yourself the research that you found, and get connected with knowledgeable people who are also sometimes blog writers or book writers or whoever, or even watching videos on how to do this stuff, and you really can launch into trying on a smaller scale some of these new ways and new options, and see what's going to work for your family. And if it works, you can scale up or stick with it, or partner with local friends, that sort of thing, to share the load, to share the tools. So just thank you on behalf of all of our Reluctant Prepper audience for sharing some of your lessons learned. We're enjoying following along and being partners on your journey.
Well, I really appreciate what you're doing here, Dunnigan, and we take this very seriously ourselves. And the more and more folks that help us along, I'm always amazed on their willingness to share their own knowledge, and I'm always very grateful for it. So we really appreciate what you're doing, like I said, and I'd love to come back and continue this journey.
Very good. Thanks so much.